All right, so today I'm going to show you how I would decorate the outside of the composition journal that we covered with watercolor paper last time. And for this project, I'm going to be using Tim Holtz Distress Paints and Dylusions ink sprays. The colors that I'm choosing are what you would consider analogous colors, colors that come right next to each other on the color wheel. So yellow, green, and blue are the three colors that I'm going to be using. So anytime those three mix together, you're all going to get variations of greens and yellows and blues. So you never end up with mud, hopefully. I'm also going to be using some Crafters Workshop stencils. These are well used, as you can see. Some of these that are made for layering over top of each other. I just really like the little bitty patterns that you can get out of these. And then I'm going to be using this heart-shaped stencil that you can layer over. You can use any variety of stencils for this project though. So to begin with, I just want to get a nice spritz in the background. I'm going to go ahead and use the fresh lime spray and kind of spritz through. I'm not super careful or worried about how or what it's looking like at this point, because we're just going to keep building up these layers. So you can see I've got some there. I always turn my stencils over and press them down on the other side to pick up the rest of the ink that's on the surface. And sometimes other colors come up, and I'm totally fine with that as well. So it's still a bit juicy here. I could dry it, or I can take a paper towel roll and just roll it over the surface to pick up some of that excess ink. Okay, so this is a nice way to get some of that excess ink off without having to spend the time drying it. And then this paper towel actually you can use in other art in a little bit. All right, so that's one layer. Then let's see, let's use a little bit of the Distress Paints. These you need to shake up a little bit first. There's a little ball in there you can hear. And these come out really juicy, almost blobby, and that's fine. Except you're not going to get a super crisp, you know, stencils with wet paints, you're not going to get a super crisp design, but I'm fine with that. But again, I'm flipping it over, and on the opposite side, I'm taking a sponge applicator, and I'm just going to kind of rub it down. That's going to get the paint that's on the front of this to come off, as well as applying, can you see right there? As well as applying some more design to the inside of the stencil. So that's a couple of different ways to use the stencils. I'm going to go ahead and rub it down somewhere else too, so that I can get all of that ink off of the front. All of the paint actually off of the front. All right, I'm going to do that with a couple of different colors and layer them up. I'm going to keep doing this until I'm good with the design that I've got going on. Do that in a couple. One good rule of thumb is if you do a design in one spot, you want to do it in 3 spots. That way your eye kind of travels across your piece and doesn't get stuck on one spot. So I've got my rule of 3s there. Now I'm going to incorporate maybe a little bit of the blue. This is Salty Ocean. We're going to see how the blue, oops, I haven't used this one yet. We're going to see how the blue and the yellow will mix together to make its own sort of green. And flip it over and try again that technique that I did earlier. Kind of get a two-toned effect when you do that. And one more spot if I'm following my own rules, right? One more spot of this. Notice I'm not going all the way out to the edge with the stencil. I'm just kind of filling in a little bit on the inside. That way it doesn't look like you've got these harsh edges. All right, I want to do a little bit more spraying, I think, over top. I want to make sure I know which side is up. Okay, this is up and this is the front facing me, so I'll put that like that. And we'll take some of this London blue. Maybe not. I'm going to take some of this vibrant turquoise. Spritz it a couple of times. flip it over. Roll to get that excess ink off of the surface. Roll it again. There we go. All right, I'm liking the effect that this is having. I can also take my sponge applicator and just sponge directly onto the surface. Okay, that's another way to do it. I can also take my paint dauber and just apply the paint directly to the surface. So that might be another way that I get a big bunch of color on there. And then I can take the actual stencil and remove some of the paint. So I've put the paint in the background. Now I'm going to take a baby wipe and I'm going to rub over the stencil. And in this way I'm actually removing some of that paint from the surface. So you get a different effect that way. And I'm going to keep building up my layers here. What else can I do? Let's maybe spritz through this with a little bit of green. And always flip it over in another area and tap it down. Or two. And just by using the leftover ink on the surface of this stencil with my sponge applicator, I'm pushing that ink through. I'm kind of cleaning the surface of my stencil off at the same time as I'm pushing that ink through and using up every last bit on my stencil. I mean on my paper. I'm going to do that with this piece right here because there's still a little bit of ink on the surface of it. And we'll see what that gives. Oh, that's kind of cool. Alright, so I'm going to keep building these layers up. Let's see, what else can I add? Sometimes I just turn my book and what else? Here's some dirty martini. I'm just going to spritz this over the top. That's kind of covering in some of my white spaces, which is good. Keep building up the layers. I think I want a little bit more yellow in here. One thing about these Dylusion sprays is they will keep giving and keep lifting and keep mixing with whatever you put on top of it. So if you don't want that, find something else to use. But if you do like that effect, the Dylusion sprays are great for that. They'll keep blending with the colors that you put over top, which is again why I like to use my analogous colors, the ones that come right next to each other on the color wheel. So if you think of two primary colors such as yellow and blue, and then the secondary color that each of those two mix together to make, that's green, then I've got a no-fail color scheme. Or I could do yellow and red and orange, or I could do blue and red and purple. Okay, let's see. I want to see if I can get some of this off in this area. So when I take the stencil and kind of scrub into it, that didn't do much, but I think there's enough ink in here that I can actually kind of scrub through, color up my background, and apply some more. Not much there either. Okay, I really liked the way that this part right here turned out with just laying down the paint and then pulling some of it back. So I'm going to do that with a little bit more yellow. And you see, you could just keep going and going and going and building up your layers on the stencil this way, but let's take this one. Sometimes it's hard to know when to stop, but I'm not going to stop yet. Alright, so that's kind of a subtle effect right there too. And I think I want a little bit more blue. So let's see, what can I do to get some more blue on there? I think I'm going to spray some of this Calypso teal. Or more vibrant turquoise. Calypso teal, I think, is what I'm going to spray. This one hasn't even been opened yet. And always flip it over. Okay, so that's a pretty good start. I've still got some white space up here, but I'm okay with the white space. I may want to do some writing or journaling or pen work on the surface of this, but that gives you an idea of what you can do with just some stencils, some sprays, some paints, and a little bit of imagination. All right, thanks for watching. All right, so here's my finished book after I added a little bit more layering. I wanted a little more contrast, so I used some black and some white. So there's the front, and there's the back. And so I used the same techniques, just added a little bit more black and white over the top of it and gave it a little bit more of a punch. And then I added some black along the spine as well. You can also take the strip of paper that you cut off and make kind of a spine cover to go over it in some sort of contrasting. Maybe I would use different colors on this. But for this one, I just did black along the spine, and I'm pretty happy with it. All right, hope you enjoyed the project.